Welcome to Muskegon Rising, a community service project of the Muskegon Rotary Club. Our purpose is to create lasting positive change. We've been doing that here since 1916. So, let's get started.
Hello, everybody. Your host, DJ Hilson, here yet again. Looking forward to today's conversation. I think it's going to be well worth the watch and certainly the listen. Obviously, thank you to Muskegon Rotary for making this happen, and looking forward to another installment of Muskegon Rising. And I'd like to welcome my guest, my compadre, if you will, the yin to my yang, all the other metaphors, Nate Johnson. Nate.
Hey, thank you, sir. Glad I get to be here. This is exciting. Glad I get to be a part of something that champions what Muskegon's doing and the amazing city that it is.
Yeah, so, as I let our producer and technical whiz know that this was an interesting spin on what's positive for Muskegon. And so I want to start our conversation out with you telling your story. In particular, don't include where you are now and what's been going on, but lead us right up to that point. And your return to Muskegon.
For sure. Yeah. So, growing up got involved with the criminal justice system at a very young age, 12 years old to be exact. And, kind of that common story, those who end up incarcerated where, come from broken homes, not a healthy family. And the environments that you're in and that lack of accountability leads us, some of us, to make poor choices that ultimately end up taking us farther than we want to go. And as we get older in life, we tend to look back and what was I thinking, right? So it was one of those kind of situations. And 12 years old was my first run-in with the law. And so from there all the way up to the age of 19, literally, DJ, every year there was something, from stealing to selling drugs. And then finally at the age of 19, I was arrested on an armed robbery and a felony firearm. And I was currently on probation at the time for delivering and manufacturing cocaine. And grew up in the downtown area, in the areas where there's a high volume of drug trafficking going on. And I was born and raised down there. And, the environment, I just turned myself over to it, lack of structure in the home, and not a really good relationship with my parents. It was good, but it wasn't healthy, I should say. Nothing, no abuse, none of that, but just not in a healthy place. And so, you start looking for your identity. You look for that sense of belonging. When it's not being met in the home, you start looking for it in the streets. And that's exactly what I did. And got out there and selling drugs. And after I was arrested, spent some time in jail and then eventually received a 17-and-a-half-year minimum prison sentence because I had a consecutive term on my drug offense in the robbery case. And after a short while I was in prison, after a couple of years, got back into the appellate court, and it was just on a technicality, and got back for resentencing, and the judge switched it just from consecutive to concurrent, so it left me with 12 and a half years to do. After I was in several years, for myself, I ended up having an encounter with God, just flipped my world upside right, and made that decision that I was done with the game, done with the selling drugs, and literally spent the next 10 years or so just renewing my mind, getting my mind right, getting my heart right, getting prepared to come home. Because I deep down inside, really, I didn't want to come back. But you see so many people come back to prison that you wonder, man, can you really get free? Can you really get out and stay out? You have those thoughts come in, and obviously I battled with them as well. And, but I just continued to renew my mind, kept doing the next right thing. And, so May 30th, 2013 I ended up receiving a parole from the Michigan Parole Board, and they granted me parole when I went up and got it. And May 30th, 2013 was able to be released from West Shoreline Correctional Facility here in Muskegon.
Obviously, I've heard your story many times, and we'll get to the reasons why I've heard your story many times here in this conversation. But one of the things, one part of that story that I just want you to highlight is a conversation you had with a fellow inmate in the yard.
Yeah.
And how that sort of started framing your purpose.
Yeah. So, after I give my life to the Lord, the next 8 years was just, renewing my mind, just in there. I turned myself over to just doing the time and just focusing on, the small things, the small choices that I was making. And really, I came to that realization that it was the mundane things of life that actually prepare you for greatness, right? And it had to start with, if I was going to get out and be successful, it had to start with me in my porter job that I was working in the housing block where they paid me 37 cents a day, that I actually worked with integrity and did exactly what I told them that I was going to do. That I was going to mop the whole floor, not just half of it, not just try to hurry up and get through. But it was those things where I just began to practice that. And so as it got close to the end of my prison sentence, I was in probably about 10 and a half years at the time, that me and a guy were on the yard, and he had quoted this phrase that was in a Christian hip hop song, and I had heard it, but it just never dawned on me. And we were on the yard, and we were just having just a normal conversation about what I was going to do when I got out, because it was so close. It was beginning to be real that the out date was here, and it was actually going to happen. And I said, even though I've given my life to the Lord, I said, still got my ability to hustle, still got my ability to recruit, but it's not to be used to sell drugs and help destroy people's lives. But I said, I have this here, and I really want to do something that's impactful, And I said, I don't know. I said, I might get out and probably go to school for business or, sell houses or do something. I said, I'm not quite sure. I said, but, with all that stuff, I said, just doesn't have the same whatever for me. And he just kind of a quick response to that. He said, well, it just pisses you off. And I said, you see that guy over here walking on the yard? He said, yeah, I see him. I said, that guy, he's been back 4 times. I said, I ain't been home once. I said, when I see these guys come back and then when they get here, they complain about the food, that the cost of phone calls hasn't gone down. It's probably gone up because it would fluctuate from time to time. I said, I just don't understand that. You're going home, and then when you get back, then you cry. I said, just it irritates me. I said, that guy over there has been here 3 times. And he said something that was it was a turning point for me. And he quoted this phrase out of this song, and he said this. He said, Nate, he said, when you discover what drives you up the wall, you'll realize that that's what you were created to solve. And for me, it was like the angels started singing, because instantly it just clicked. And I realized, you just know when you know her, sometimes you're like, that's it right there. I just knew that I was here to teach people how to win the war over staying out. And that was such a pivotal time in my life where I really discovered what my why was. And it was here to help individuals win the war over staying out so that they didn't come back. But I realized I had to live my own solution first. I had to get out first, right? I still had a couple of years. So it wasn't like, okay, yeah, why don't you start doing this? Yeah. But the preparation, the formation of this thing began around that time. And then so now is that process to get out myself. I got to live your own solution. And then there was this real sense that I had an obligation to help clean up what I helped mess up. And this is something I thought through for a long time, for those, obviously the next couple of years, really. And I realized that this was something I was going to have to give my life to. It wasn't just a 9 to 5. This had to be something that I had to give my life to if I was going to make any real significant impact in this world.
So I'm going to, for our audience, I'm going to frame sort of the next area where I want to take our conversation, so that folks understand that certainly there is a difference between jail and prison. I mean, jail certainly has to do with any sentence that you receive that's a year or less.
Right.
Prison is anything that's over a year or more. So there's 2 differences as it relates to where you go. But the reality of it is that 90% of those that end up incarcerated end up coming back home. 90%. So those that are going in are eventually going to come back home. Right. And that's sort of where I want to frame this next part. The first thing I want you to talk about is the barriers that you faced when you came home in 2013, and then just so that I'm not going to surprise you, we're going to pivot to how you ended our last little segment here, which is how you were going to champion the war on not going back.
Yeah. So coming home, I mean, obviously, education was not something I really valued before going in, right? And so, but I understood the value in that once I was incarcerated. And at the time, you couldn't go to college. As high as education as you could get was a GED and a trade. And so I got my GED. I got my, this was funny. So I had to go see the classifications director for taking a trade. And I'm one of those guys, I can't fix anything. Don't give me I know what the difference between a Phillips and a flathead screwdriver and a hammer. I can work with that. But you go beyond that, I'm not the guy you call, right? And so I went in to meet with the classifications director, and they were classifying me whether you could take auto mechanics, building trades, custodial maintenance, or horticulture. And she looked at my file and saw that I had a drug conviction on there. She said, could you fix it? I said, I don't, and I have no desire to either.
Yeah.
I said, my philosophy is I always wanted to make enough money to pay somebody else to do it. I didn't want to do it myself. She said, well, I think you probably would do good in the horticulture program. Figure, hey, drugs was your thing. Maybe you might,
Yeah.
So they ended up putting me in that. I did it. It was great. It was a year program. Learned how to, plant flowers and vegetables and made the best of it. And when I came home, I mean, even thinking about, okay, here's the time when you come home, and thinking the kind of jobs that you could get, things that were sustainable wages, something that you could actually raise a family and own a home off of. And some of those challenges came with employment. There was a number of things that I wanted to do, and I even applied for. And then they're like, no, you can't do this because of the felony, which I totally understood. And trying to convince people of a reality that I knew, I said, look, I don't have no desire to want to do that anymore. Yeah. Just give me a chance. I promise you won't be disappointed. Obviously, that never came, but that was a chance. So I started out working at the car wash, and I just knew I was going back to the drawing board. Keep a good attitude, work hard, do what you're supposed to do, and in time, things will change. And so I did that, and then so my decision was work at the car wash for a few days a week, and then I went to college, and I did the work-study program out at MCC. I did that, and a lot of the other barriers that I faced, I think because when I came home, I was able to stay with my dad, so housing wasn't a real issue. The employment, I wanted to do certain things, but I understood there's a process here. The relational piece, I was able to put myself in a really good environment to where I could develop healthy relationships with healthy people, and not trying to develop relationships with people that were involved in the same activities before I came home. And so some of the challenges, my biggest challenge was with the employment piece, and it was more my desire. I also understood the piece. Hey, you've been incarcerated. There's this proving time, and people will be taking risk because of past behaviors. If they look at patterns, there's a strong possibility from what the paper says, right, that there could be some poor decision making that could ultimately impact them. So that was my biggest challenge right there. I'd have to say was the employment piece. And as far as like relationships, I was able to, because people dealt with me for who I was at the time. They didn't look at my past, and there wasn't residue on there that would make them think, there's some things here that are making me suspicious or whatever. And and people embraced me, and I got a clean start with them, and was able to let my character, my life speak for itself. So I think employment was the biggest thing that became a real challenge for me. Now, with some of the guys that I had known coming home, their circumstances were a bit different. And so they had a number of different challenges. Some of them, the challenges were created because of their own decision making.
Sure.
Not just because, hey, I came home and I got all these different challenges. That's not really the case. And I think it's when the reentry, when individuals return home from prison, what's getting ready to be exposed or revealed is how you stewarded your time on the inside. And the number one thing when individuals come home that's going to determine whether someone's going to be successful or not is character development. You see, when you're being paid, even if it's 37 cents, to mop the floor from wall to wall and not skip any of the tiles, can you do that when no one has to watch you? Can you do that every day, even though you may miss a few minutes of your yard time, whatever the case may be? Can you have enough, some good work ethic, good character to do what you say that you're going to do? And it's in those times where you develop those things and not stealing things out of the kitchen because you want to do different things. All of those things is when character development is lacking in your developmental stage, when you're in the pre-entry phase while you're in prison. Once you get out here, all of it's going to surface. People are going to see it, and your decision-making is going to be evident to everyone because it's like, you like cutting corners here. That's what you were doing in there. So when you lack it in there, it gets exposed out here.
So obviously, as you were recognizing and realizing, we talk about character development and then obviously understanding what the barriers are for those coming back into society. I want to, again, put this conversation start framing it into why Muskegon now is in a prime, is really leading the way as it relates to reentry. But historically, for you, that process began. Can you describe for our listeners how that process began and what developed as a result of, understanding what it was going to take in order to make folks, going back to using your words, win the war on going back inside?
Yeah, so when I came home, I remember literally right off, weeks after being home, I would bump into guys who I had served time in prison with, and I'd see them at the store or grocery store, whatever the case would be in town, and I'd bump into them, and I could tell by their countenance something was different. They weren't in a healthy state, and I would pull up on them and talk with them and say, "Hey, what's going on?" And as we would talk, I could hear that something shifted here, and I stopped going to church, I stopped doing this, and maybe they had picked up a number of bad habits, and so this happened over the course of probably 6 to 8 months. And I just felt like I was to bring these guys together and kind of get together with them once a week and kind of stir up on the inside of them the things that they were singing that they were going to do when they came home, but while they were doing it in there. And some of them had come to faith in God in there, and I wanted to stir that up as well, just kind of help to recalibrate, so to speak. And so I'd run into these guys, and I just knew, I said, man, something has to change. We got to do something different. And so I ended up meeting a guy who had a similar vision, wanted to be impactful here in Muskegon. And we kind of complemented each other because he was more administrative and liked Excel spreadsheets. And I'm like, who needs an Excel spreadsheet? Let's go change the world, right? And so I could see the vision of where we were going and what we were going to do. And so we complemented each other. So we teamed up and just began to dream and talk to anybody who would listen to us. And finally, after about 2 years of doing that, out of that 2 years, we had got I think we had people would give periodically. I think we had raised like $12,000, and we knew, says, hey, we're going to have to take this. It's time to go. We just have to do it. We've been talking about it too much. So we need to take this $12,000. Let's invest it in a banquet, and we'll invite anyone who will come, and let's do a pitch of what we're going to do, what we want to do here in Muskegon to help those returning home from prison. And so we did, and that evening we raised enough money, about literally, I think to be exact, about 6 months worth of capital. We could get just to launch them, and we knew we had 6 months that we had to just get out here and just do it and prove that we had a solution to the problem here, this recidivism, this back and forth deal. And so we did that, and then progressively over time, we just started out when we finally did launch in January 2016. We started just doing mentoring and employment, and that was it. And in time, we begin to discover that employment wasn't the only issue, that there was a group of individuals returning home from prison that didn't have a good support system. They didn't have family to return to, or if they did have family homes to return to, there weren't healthy environments for them to exist in. And when you have a desire, man, I don't want to get back involved in that. But if you go back into a household where drugs is okay, all the crime, all the different things are okay, it's just a timing issue. It's like the old adage, if you hang out at the barbershop long enough, eventually you'll get a haircut, right? And so if you're in that, eventually that's what you're going to become. So we realized that there was a group of people that they genuinely didn't want to go back to prison, but they didn't, starting out with a home, having access to food, to healthy people, to employment, to educational groups that could help them in terms of the way that they think, kind of giving new thought processes, helping to shift the paradigm, so to speak. They didn't have an environment that kind of like a greenhouse where they could get in, get planted, stay in it for a little while and grow, kind of grow a little bit as a person, mature a bit, and then they could go out on their own as they've been being employed and, get their own place. So we were seeing that. So when we first started, we just started out with employment and mentoring. And then eventually we realized that housing was the issue. So we started a reentry housing program. And eventually we were seeing individuals coming home from prison that had developed, that went in due to really drug addiction that was motivating them in terms of breaking the law and end up in prison. So we saw recovery. Drug addiction was a real issue, and individuals needed recovery services. So we started Fresh Coast Recovery. And we had recovery housing and reentry housing. Then it came to where we saw, individuals are coming home, not coming home. I guess this was kind of brand new to us, where trauma, people who have been impacted by traumatic events, and how that's altered the brain. It's altered the way that they think, the way that they view. And individuals have, because it's never been talked about, you're just stuffing this stuff down, and they're, in some regards, it may not be the appropriate language, but like damaged goods, so to speak. And it's like, okay, these individuals need to heal. So shortly after that, we ended up purchasing a counseling practice that was alcohol chemical abuse consultants. But we were able to hire trauma therapists and different counselors and therapists on staff to really deal with the why behind the what. Why do you do what you do in terms of breaking the law and drug addiction? So we were able to really help with the counseling practice to unravel the conflicted life, so to speak, provide housing. So now they don't have to think about a roof over their head, water, running water, heat, and food. And when individuals are returning home, if you could take care of those 4 essential things right there, you've won 50% of the battle.
Right.
Now it's, okay, now we have to deal, what's going on in here? What's the why? Why do you keep returning back to crime? Why do you keep returning back to a drug that you know is going to destroy your life and ultimately destroy everything in your wake? You're going to leave a wake, and it's going to destroy your children, it's going to destroy your family, and all of the above, right?
Right.
So we wanted to help. How do we unravel that? And we got the counseling practice, and that dealt with a large majority. So that knocked off that. Now we're about 80%. Now, hey, we got this. So what is the other 3? 30% is the way that people think. And people, when they're coming home, they're looking for the sense of belonging.
Right.
When kids run out to the streets to join the gangs and the streets and whatnot, it's not that they're necessarily running to something. They're running from something that's not being met in the household.
Right.
Right? The sense of belonging should be being met in the household. When you have a healthy family there, speaking life over the children, then there's no appetite or desire to want to run out to join a gang because it's being taken care of at home. And so we really want to meet that need, that sense of belonging. And so when we can meet that need and we can provide a healthy community, the chances of an individual going back to crime or back to drug use reduces significantly. Now, obviously, now there's the battle in the mind. Can they still be tempted? Absolutely. Can you allow your thoughts can you meditate on things you know you're not supposed to think on and eventually it lures you back into them? Absolutely. But it comes down to a power of a choice then. You ultimately get to make a choice on what you want to do. And obviously, when we're talking social things, nothing's ever 100%.
Right.
But for the majority, right, it comes down to the power of a choice when we're able to take care of all of the necessary things. Now you get to make it. It's not that there's not going to be a fight here with your thought process in that whole process of renewing it. We're not saying it's not going to be a fight. You're going to have. You were born for a fight. All of us were. With whatever it is, all of us were born for a fight.
Absolutely.
Right? And in that season of their life, that is the fight that they were born for, and they can win it if staying in a healthy community, you have your necessary needs being taken care of. Now the fight to renew the mind and recalibrate fully is you're in an environment where it actually can be done. We can actually go to the next level.
So Fresh Coast Alliance is the name of the organization.
Yeah.
It started out on a $12,000 budget.
$12,000,
and now the budget is roughly what?
$1.2 million now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Obviously, you have full-time staff.
Yeah.
You have contracted staff.
Yeah.
The location.
Yeah. So we're right in the Sheldon Park neighborhood in East Muskegon. And there's a whole campus there. So we have currently about 8 homes in the neighborhood there that individuals are able to live in. We're in the former Lutheran School building on Isabel and Roberts, where that's the training center now. And so there's about 18 groups that happen all throughout the week. There's reentry coaches, recovery coach. There's an employment director. I mean, it's a one-stop shop for individuals coming home from prison. It's a one-stop shop. And if you're coming out of the world of addiction, it's a one-stop shop. I mean, in the event, they have to make the choice.
Right.
You have to put forth the effort. We can't do that.
Right.
Our responsibility is just to set the table with the goods, with the good stuff. It's your responsibility to eat. I can't do that for you. But as far as everything being needed to be taken care of, we have that right there. And then one block north is the counseling practice. So everything literally is within walking distance. About a mile south is the parole office. You go a mile west, you got the courthouse and probation.
Yep.
It's right off Apple Avenue and 31, so it's right on a main thoroughfare, so access to jobs right there. They're getting ready to put an Aldi grocery store in, which is going to be perfect for our folks. And so everything literally is right there in that neighborhood. And we have close to about, I'd say, between all of the groups, weekly, we have about 100 people who come through those doors looking for resources, looking for help every week.
Yeah, for folks that may or are not familiar with Fresh Coast Alliance, let me just shed a little light on that it is an organization that does provide all those really important things for people who are looking for support, looking for answers, looking for help.
Yeah.
And not having a door shut in their face or being, prejudged because of their prior bad decision making, let's say. And so having been a part of that organization for some time now, I have seen the benefit and the power that you're speaking of, giving folks that, making them feel like, okay, I am a human, I've got worth. Yeah. I've got purpose, and now I'm just being helped in how I direct that purpose.
Yeah. The cool thing is not only that, but the other ways that we're able to help divert, something that you and I get to partner in with the power of a choice with the school assemblies. And you and I get to, with a team of those from Fresh Coast, we get to go around to the schools here in Muskegon County, and it's more of the diversion piece of Fresh Coast, right? Where we get to have real life conversations, share real stories about how powerful one choice is. That one choice can change the whole trajectory of your life. And we want to encourage kids not to make life-altering decisions now. Now, we know that one conversation people aren't going to go, oh, yeah, I'm never going to make a poor decision again.
Right.
No, the idea is we're going in as farmers. We're just going in to plant seeds, and we're hoping that they germinate, and we're hoping that there comes a time in their life where they think back on that conversation right there, probably after a series of poor decision making. And hopefully they're not any major life-altering ones, but they come and they hear those phrases. One choice can change the whole trajectory of your life. And they think back on some of those stories that they heard, and they realize, that's not what I want. So we get to do that. That's powerful. And then we also get to help because of the clean slate laws here in Michigan, how individuals can get their records expunged, which I'm a recipient of the clean slate law. And so we're able to do that. So individuals who had made poor decisions 10, 15, 20 years ago, and they've grown out of that, they've matured, but there's still some collateral consequences that are attached to those decisions that were made years ago, and now there's an opportunity to get a clean slate. So it doesn't affect, very specifically, housing and certain employment opportunities, right? And so that right there is huge. And then, I think the one thing that I'm looking forward to is this basketball game, April 22nd. And so you guys will probably see this on Facebook, social media, maybe even YouTube. And I'll be holding Prosecutor Hilson. And what we're going to do is he's going to put a team of law enforcement guys together, maybe some ladies, and then we're going to put a team of formerly incarcerated people. We're going to meet up on the basketball court at Muskegon High School. And we're going to do it as a school assembly, a short unity power of a choice event. And we were talking about before we started here about the razzle dazzle of this podcast here. So on that day, I'm going to bring the razzle dazzle on the basketball court to Mr. Hilson here and his team. So I'm looking forward to that.
Listen, I'm going to bring you some bags of honey mustard pretzels that you can have pregame before we lace them up. Well, yeah, I mean, just so people understand, our relationship, it literally began with us not really knowing one another.
Right, yeah.
And it was a conduit of a newspaper article written by, at the time, Muskegon Chronicle reporter Heather Peters.
Yeah.
Who I think was writing a story about you.
Yeah.
And somehow I was at the Chronicle building, the then Chronicle building, and I can't remember if it was based off of that or something else. And she asked me, I remember this to this day, talking to her. She said, do you know Nate Johnson? I said, I don't know Nate Johnson. And he's this guy just got paroled and he really wants to make a positive change difference here in Muskegon. What do you think?
Yeah.
And at the time, I said, hey, look, I mean, I'm all about those that want to make those positive changes, and I'll partner with anybody that really wants to make this city and this county special. And from there, you and I got to do some events together, and then ultimately, as you've talked about, the power of a choice was born.
Yeah.
And that has become almost a wanted assembly by our school leaders. So I applaud, first and foremost, our school leaders for allowing us to come in and have these conversations. And you're right. I mean, they are real, raw conversations that we're having with these middle school through high school kids. And I got to tell you, over the last few years of doing this, we have seen some really, I'd say, very powerful results, right? Yeah. I mean, we have seen students open up in assemblies that I've never seen before.
Right, yeah.
And for me, because I moderate, which is, I get kind of the easy job, but to actually at the end when the students are being dispersed, having, I mean, the speakers, the folks that are telling these stories, literally get mobbed by these kids.
Yeah.
Who want to know more, and they're hungry for more.
Yeah.
To me has been a game changer.
Yeah.
And it's that proactive approach, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's the idea of, all right, we're working with those who have made mistakes and are coming home, but Fresh Coast is also being proactive and saying, hey, let's as you said, plant the seeds before they get faced with these really life-altering decisions.
Absolutely. It's huge. I mean, because in our youthful naivety, we don't even have the capacity to process how powerful a choice is, right?
Right.
And how many people have actually heard that before, how powerful one choice, had a conversation about it at their age, right? You're talking 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th graders. Has anyone sat them down? Maybe a handful, but really sat and had a real candid conversation about one choice, how powerful it is. Every single person who's ever been to prison, it literally took between 5 and 60 seconds to make the decision that they made that ultimately costs 10, 15, 20, 30 years, some natural life in prison. It doesn't take that long. That one choice, and it altered the rest of their lives. That's how powerful it is, right? It could a decision can further your education or not further your education. It's going to have lifelong consequences to it. So you look at that, and then we have that opportunity to go in and speak to thousands of kids throughout the school year. I mean, that's That's pretty amazing. I love it. And I think that we will see the impact 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now where we're seeing students who will come back and matter of fact, there's been a couple of them. Some of them are in law enforcement now. I've gone into the colleges to speak, and they were in the criminal justice class. And they'll come up and shake my hand and say, "Oh, I remember when you came in." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm still singing the same tune, man. Power of a choice." But they remembered that, and it was like, man, it was powerful, and it was impactful, you know. So I'm blessed I get to do it with you. And I think that this is really a good expression of what healthy justice is, where we can see law enforcement, prosecutor's office, and formerly incarcerated people working together on how we can solve the crime in our cities, right? Because there's certain things. I mean, think of the guys who are coming home, the unique voice that I have with them.
Yep.
Because of my experience, right? And in how bringing that, and then it brings other leaders who may not have the capacity to start an organization, but they have a desire to want to be a part of the solution. So we think of Big Kitch and some of the other guys some of the ladies too that are around, who now we're able to form a team of people that can say, "Hey, listen, man, we found the way out. Come on."
Yeah.
You don't have to stay in that cycle of defeat anymore. And then we're coupling that with, you're bringing law enforcement, you know, think of Jason and them at Perot, and Scott and them at probation, and Mike at the sheriff's department, where we're bringing all of these allies together to actually solve this problem.
Right.
Think of the resources now that we have available because all the partnerships, and then the unique voices that we all bring, that we all in our own lane, we have these different voices with different groups, whether if it's legislators, the MDOC, people coming home from prison. That's the unique thing about Muskegon County, where we're able to reinvent this whole reentry piece and actually solve the problem. We're in the process, I think we're both in agreement with this, we want to destroy every excuse for why you would go back to prison.
Absolutely.
And if we can discover that here's a hindrance, here's a block, here's something that's preventing you from moving on to success, well, let's not complain about it. Let's discover the solution for it. And sometimes some consequences just have lingering effects, and we have to learn how to work with them and work through that. But it doesn't mean that life is over with. It doesn't mean that you can't enjoy life and that you can't live a successful life. You just got to find, if the door of opportunity isn't there, you just got to build one and build your own door.
Right.
And walk through, right?
Yeah.
I know a number of people who come through because of jobs being a hindrance, and they weren't within the time frame to get the regular response. They were former drug dealers. They're entrepreneurs at heart. They just got to shift that. And some of them have started businesses, and they have some successful ones here in Muskegon County.
Yeah.
Right in the city of Muskegon, guys that I've done time with have successful businesses, and they're doing good. They just shifted, and they're doing great. They're healthy relationships with their children. They're married, homeowners. And if you met them today, you'd never know they spent that much time in prison unless they told you.
Right.
It was a mind shift, and they discovered what their why was, you know?
Yeah, and I sort of want to finish this conversation with what I think I'm stealing this from you, the Muskegon model as it relates to reentry. Mm-hmm. Yep. And, you know, Reentry United. Yep. And where that has been recognized and now where it's going. And I think it's really important, again, for our listeners to understand that this wasn't something that you read in books or that you've copied from somewhere else. This was developed and formed here in Muskegon County. Yeah. And so talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so Reentry United was something that was birthed in summer of 2022. For those who don't know, I get to go around and speak at a number of different conferences on criminal justice reform, reentry. I get to speak at the prisons fairly often. And I was invited to a particular conference in the summer of 2022. And I was there. I had left, and I was just a bit disturbed a little bit and kind of frustrated. It felt like my experience there, and I'm not saying that it was their intentions, but my experience was, I was like, we were just sitting around complaining about what the problem was. All of these challenges. And it felt like people were trying to point the finger at other organizations and institutions to say that they were the problem. And I'm like, and a lot of the problems that they were complaining about, I'm like, we've actually solved those here in Muskegon at Fresh Coast. And I couldn't understand, why do you think that that's a problem? Just, you have to solve this thing. And it came back to the way that they were thinking. And so when I left there, I'm like, this is frustrating. So I called a friend of mine and who was there, and I said, what'd you think about, earlier today at the conference? And she says, man, she communicated to me what I was feeling and thinking too. And I'm like, we got to turn this thing around. So that day we decided, you know what? Let's do something that is solution-based, that actually solves the problem to reentry in terms of educating other folks that are wanting to do this. And let's bring the grass tops and grassroots people together so that we can all be in the room and let's solve this. Let's bring the legislators. Let's bring Michigan Department of Corrections. Let's bring the practitioners. Let's bring the prosecutor's office and law enforcement and parole and probation. Instead of pointing the finger at one another, let's all come together in the room and let's discuss what is the solution. What can we do and what can we not do? But let's do everything within our power to actually end this whole cycle of defeat so that we can destroy what we're attempting to do here in Muskegon, so we can destroy every excuse on why someone would come back to prison. And so we did, and we launched it literally 90 days later. And we had over 250 people come, and we got to meet at Grand Valley State University. It was hosted there, 250 people, and we had a waiting list, and there was a real appetite for what we were getting ready to do. And to got there, it was phenomenal. I mean, the director, Heidi Washington, the director of MDOC, was there, and she says, man, I want to be there. And so she came. We had the privilege of hearing her speak and kind of giving us an update on where Michigan was at in terms of reentry efforts, which is amazing. And some who don't know, Michigan is further ahead than most states in the U.S. in terms of reentry services. So she came. We had, and this last time, obviously, me and you got to speak there with Perot, and then we had John Pallas from the AG's office came. Representative Amos O'Neill out of Saginaw came. And we were able to bring all of these people together to talk, even the Pro Board. This was the first time. They said, we've never been a part of something like this. But this solution-based connecting with the community, the Pro Boards actually joined our team, which has never been done before. And so all of these folks have been coming. And now we're at a place this year where it'll be in August 2nd at Calvin University, where now it's being opened up to the Midwest. So now we're having the DOC employees from Ohio, Indiana, Wisconsin, Illinois, and Kentucky. Now we're going to have people come from all of these neighboring states to come and learn on what we're doing here in Michigan, but what started here in Muskegon.
Yeah.
Like this is going to impact not just what we're doing here locally, and we're impacting the whole state because we have an influence there, but now it's going to go beyond our own borders. To the point to where Brian Shipman he's the chair of the parole board, sent an email and asked if I'd come speak with him and a couple others in Seattle, Washington at the Paroling Authorities International Conference in Seattle this May. So it was like, and part of that conversation was like, some of these other states, they're not doing this. This would be like a breath of fresh air. We need to come and talk to these other states about these things. And it's not that we can't learn from the others. Right. I'm sure they're probably doing some very unique things that we can learn from, we can glean from, and we want to. But there's a uniqueness about what's happening here that actually is going to have an impact in solving this recidivism of back and forth to prison, this cycle of defeat that individuals are finding themselves in. Muskegon, Fresh Coast, and our whole team, all of our allies here in Muskegon. It's not just solely just us. It's all of us working together as a team that we're actually solving the problem that's beginning to get not just state, but national attention, where they're like, hey, you guys are doing something that we need to come and watch and learn. And so that's happening. Yeah,
I mean, and to me, again, I don't involve myself in things lightly. I don't do it just to say that I'm involved in it. And for me, it was an opportunity to understand and really appreciate what reentry means, in particular the barriers that are circled around it, and then become part of the solution and part of the team. And that has been really a very cool experience for me because, again, if you would have asked me 15, 20 years ago, well, listen, you're gonna partner with a guy who's an ex-con who's returned from prison, and I'd say you're crazy.
Yeah.
And I think that mindset, I'm certainly glad that my mindset changed. First and foremost, because through your efforts and Fresh Coast, I've met some really tremendous men and women who really just want a second chance. That's all they're asking. They want a chance to prove to everybody that they have value and they're worth every single ounce of whatever. They just want that. And that is refreshing for me. So I mean, again, what it means for Muskegon in the positive direction is that we're looking at sort of crime prevention in a lot of different lights. We're trying to do things that reduces an individual's want and desire to commit crime. We are planting seeds into the generation that's coming up so that they really use their brains in making good decisions, or at least avoiding those huge pitfalls that a really bad decision can lead them to. And ultimately, it's to make Muskegon continue to be great. And so, from my standpoint, this is really a huge part of why I wanted you as a part of this, because I think people need to recognize that, industry is important, development is important, all those things that make communities grow. But there's all other segments of community that need support and need that balance so that, you can have that development. But the development's no good if people say, hey, don't walk into that neighborhood because, you're going to get your car stolen, you're going to get whatever the case is. Or if you go downtown after 9 o'clock, this is what's going to happen to you. There's that whole piece that is important. So, Nate, I can't thank you enough for, finding that why, listening to it,
absolutely,
and not ignoring it, and allowing me to sort of enter your world and be a partner.
Hey, likewise, I appreciate it. I'm glad we get to partner together, and it's more than just working relationship, but friends.
Absolutely.
And we get to team up and bring our gifts and our talents and our voices and our influence together to really be a part of that solution and help make Muskegon safer, make it better, make it more attractive to people who want to come here. It's like, Fresh Coast and other organizations, they're worthy causes to invest into. And all of us have a role to play in our city. And we realize our lane is to gather those who have been incarcerated, who may be struggling with getting on their feet and kind of figuring some life issues out. We understand that's our lane, and that's our lane in making Muskegon better, making Muskegon safer. So we're not saying everyone has to get involved in it. It's like, hey, there's a team of us, a group of us who we've given our lives to walk with these individuals and help them get to the next chapter of their life, and in some real sense discovering their why too, so that they can join the fight and then they can get back in the fight and tell others, say, hey, look, man, we found the way out. Why don't you come join us here? So I appreciate it.
Yeah, well, I have to at least respond to this idea that you're gonna walk up and down the basketball court with me. I'm not going to talk to you about my training regimen.
Right.
You got a ways to go.
The razzle dazzle.
You got a ways to go, buddy. You got a ways to
let the games begin. April 22nd. Can't get here fast enough.
Can't get here. Well, again, Nate, thanks for joining me today. Really appreciate it. Thanks for all you do.
Appreciate you.
That's it for our segment. Again, thank you to the Muskegon Rotary for allowing us to create Muskegon Rising as a podcast. And this doesn't happen and isn't a possibility without the vision and the ingenuity of Mike Vogus. Thank you, Mike, for putting together such a great program for our community.